Hey guys, Mike for Sim Racing 604, and you are looking at the IER P13b. This is a very interesting mod for Assetto Corsa. IER released the IER P13c many years ago. IER came out and basically revolutionized what we thought of Assetto Corsa cars, or what Assetto Corsa cars could feel like. IER simulations pushed the limit at the time of the custom shaders patch, and before that there was sort of a flavor to all Assetto Corsa cars, and they broke that mold. So they did an incredible level of work on the suspension and steering components of the P13c, and basically reset our brains in terms of what to expect from an Assetto Corsa mod, or what an Assetto Corsa mod car could feel like. And fast forward to 2024, they have released the Successor with this P13b. In style, it's very similar to the P13c, but in terms of its function and its modernity, I guess would be the right word, it's on a different level. So the P13c unfortunately got left behind. It stopped being updated by IER simulations, and they hinted that they would get around to updating it, and so instead of updating the P13c, what they did was release this P13b. It's a Le Mans prototype from 2013, loosely based on LMP2, but with some LMP1 characteristics to it. So this is the newest mod from IER simulations, and possibly the last. There has been hints that they've done so much work outside of the Assetto Corsa modding world that this is kind of a temporary dip back into the Assetto Corsa modding pool before they return to sort of their bread and butter of creating simulations outside of Assetto Corsa. So the P13b is a paid mod. There's a 30% off coupon if you use the code P13c for the first 100 customers if you're interested in buying this. I remember when the P13c was released so many years ago. Myself, I was covering it, and Chris Hay was covering it. And Chris Hay actually did a great interview with the, head of the IER team, and he talked about some of the details within the P13c that made it unique. And if you want to just hear somebody who knows the mechanics of race cars, that is a great interview to listen to. So be sure to check out Chris Hay's interview. And those functions that we saw in the P13c, much of the sort of intent of those has been carried over, but modernized to the latest version of the custom shaders patch. You are required to have version 0.2.3 or better of the custom shaders patch in order to get the most out of this car, and there's a ton on offer. So firstly, I'm going to take you into the pits, and I'll show you some of the setup options, and then we'll get it out of track, of course. This is not only unique because of the level of detail that went into the suspension and the level of work that went into the steering, but also the sounds are fantastic. There's a great level of detail to the car, perhaps not quite up to the level of VRC and RSS, but still the car looks excellent. There's a bunch of liveries included, and it's all around just a very impressive car. So lots to talk about here, and again, this is going to stand out because IER Simulation does such a great job of making a realistic mod, and they put so much detail into what happens sort of between the tire and the driver that you can't help but feel that this is quite possibly the most realistic feeling car in Assetto Corsa. So is that true? Tough for me to judge. I have never driven a 2013 era Le Mans prototype, so I have no idea. But again, you just get the sense with IER simulations that everything is just so incredibly accurate. So let's go ahead and jump into the pits, and then we will get driving. All right, so here we are, about to jump in the IER P13b. Let's have a quick look at the setup menu because it's quite interesting. So as you can see, fully adjustable gears, including the final gear ratio. 6 on offer here. Theoretical top speed in the default setup of 281 kilometers an hour. Jumping over to tires, there are 2 compounds, the S9 hards that you're seeing here, and then the wets. Fuel, maximum capacity looks to be 80 liters, 75 liters actually. And then we have different engine maps. So as you can see here, the higher the map setting, the less fuel burn. Now, what's interesting is Take a listen to the idle. And take a listen to the idle as I change engine maps. So in case you didn't notice the difference, this is the lowest engine map. That's the highest. So you can actually hear the efficiency of the engine changing, or not the efficiency of the engine, but the available power based on the engine map changing by idle. That's pretty impressive. Traction control, 1 and 2 stages. There's a little call out there telling you what TC1 and TC2 will actually do. Aero, there's actually 2 packages available, low and high downforce. What you're seeing here, it's a bit hard to see, but in the left side of the screen there, you can see there are 2 fins, 2 canards, if you will. If you change that, then it becomes the low downforce package. Yeah, so you can adjust that. Bodywork wicker, I believe this is the rear wing. Yeah, so it's hard to see here. Let me just get around back of the car, and if we adjust the wicker, as you can see, it changes, and then we have different rear wing angles. You can see it moving up and down. I'm actually going to turn that down a bit. Alignment, this is pretty much what you'd expect. One of the few settings on this car that looks pretty much what you would expect, what you'd expect it to be. I'm seeing tire treads there, so I'm scared I didn't change my tires back to... yes, I left them as dry. There we go, we got our slicks on. Alright, so dampers, again, bump, fast bump, rebound, fast rebound. Pretty much what you would expect. We have friction faces within the differential. So this car allows you to get real down and nerdy with your adjustments. Friction faces is something I've never seen in any other car. It's possible that it's out there, I've just never seen it. Power ramp, coast ramp, and then negative preload, interestingly. And you can adjust the number of turns between, wow, goes way, way up, 250 down to 0. So default 125, right in the center, I'm going to leave it there. Engine limiter, brake bias, power steering level, interesting. And it says it requires the real steering forces to be enabled in custom shaders patch. Suspension, as you can see, the anti-roll bar is in, I don't know what unit of measure that is. I'm sure somebody could drop it in the comments. I don't think I have seen that before. You can adjust your push rod length for each individual tire, and then spring rate is something you would expect to see. Advanced suspension, bump rubber, rubber stack, and bump rubber gap. As you can probably tell, you are not dealing with your average Assetto Corsa mod here. Like I said, this one allows you to get real down and nerdy with it. And then the heave, again, bump rubber, stack third front, and gap third front. Like, this is next level. And then, of course, pit stop strategies. Let's go ahead and jump in the car here. All right, so time to drive the IER P13b. It's going to take me a while to get used to not saying C. So we're here at Mugello, skinned by Pyre. So it looks like the 2020 Formula One race here, in case you're wondering. And what are my thoughts on the IER P13b? I've had some time, thanks to forgetting to press record, to get used to this car and have some opinions of it. And I will say, first and foremost, if you're going to buy this car, much like if you're a runner, you probably know the saying, don't judge a run in the first mile. Oftentimes, as runners, we start out and feel terrible in the first mile, and then by a few more miles, we feel great. And I would say the same is true with this car. Do not judge it by your first few laps with the IER P13b. Reason being is it's going to feel almost completely different than anything you've driven in this title. So how does it feel different? What makes it different? Well, you feel everything. You feel everything. The level of detail that of the information that comes from this mod into your steering wheel, especially if you have a direct drive wheel, is phenomenal. The suspension work and the steering mechanisms that they have on board this that are feeding back into my wheel are just incredibly detailed, and there's just so much on offer here. So interestingly, with all that information feeding back to me, one would think that there is a profound sense of connection to the car and you feel like there's really no limit. And the answer to that is no. That's not how this car feels. Interestingly, it still very much has a knife edge for grip. So going around the corners at the speeds I'm going in these laps, I'm not a particularly great driver, and I'm not going to be pushing this car to its absolute limit. It's decent. It's decent. It doesn't feel too out of place, but if you go too hard into a corner, you're going to get punished almost right away. So taking too much curb, understeering, if you can induce understeer, it's not easy in this car. It's surprisingly well balanced, but if I go too wide here to the curb, like it doesn't want to turn in. So surprisingly, despite having all that information coming from these steering and suspension systems, it doesn't feel like super connected to the road. Now, my standard of reference, I think the greatest driving Assetto Corsa mod of all time is the Mercer V8 from Race Sim Studio, and that one, like, you just feel instantly connected. And you know, should you go too hard into a corner and go over too much curb, it's just going to bounce itself back onto the racing line almost, and you're not going to have, too much of a fight on your hands. This one will fight you. So again, if you push too hard, too much curb at the wrong time, if you throw it too hard into a corner and induce some oversteer or understeer, it feels like you're going to lose the car. It feels like it's going to spin, and you may very well spin. So, like I said, don't judge this car by those first few laps. Go in knowing that this one is going to be challenging until you get sort of a feel for the car. And then once you start to push, once you start to sort of get a feel for things and where you can push, where you cannot, that's when the car truly becomes appreciated in this title, and you start to understand how it differentiates itself from anything you've driven before. Now, is it so far ahead of everything else like the P13c was? No, frankly. I'm surprised and, inclined to believe everything IER says about, the sophistication of the car. But it's interesting that, and this is possibly due to the P13c, the rest of the Assetto Corsa modding community seems to have somewhat caught up. And I will say this does feel unique, and there's just a ton of information coming into my wheel from the virtual, into my steering wheel, from the virtual suspension and steering. But I lost my train of thought there. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, but it's not so far ahead of everyone else. When we first got the P13c, it was just like 5-10 steps ahead of where anyone else was. Even the greats, VRC, Race Sim Studio, they were not doing what IER was capable of doing and demonstrated with the P13c. This is not that. This is not 10 steps ahead of everyone else. This is equal or slightly ahead of everyone else. Again, I wouldn't call this one mind-blowing. I wouldn't call it, so sophisticated and ahead of everyone else. Does it feel good? Oh yeah, it feels phenomenal. Don't get me wrong. But again, it just doesn't have that gap to the competition like the P13c did. And, it's possible that because we had the P13c, that was, blowing the lid off of what we thought Assetto Corsa could or should feel like. Other modding teams kind of took note and, definitely didn't copy, but at the same time, the limits of what we thought were possible in Assetto Corsa were reset thanks to the P13c. P13b, I don't think does that. I don't think it resets anything in Assetto Corsa. I don't think it necessarily pushes the limits of the title. However, very well done car, incredibly detailed, incredibly sophisticated from a mechanical perspective, and yeah, just so much good packed into this car. So would I recommend it? Well, at this moment, no. Would I recommend a P13b? It depends. Depends on you. If you're a beginner, forget it. If you're new to racing sims, forget it. If you know you're not that familiar with how some of these cars should be driven or how to handle a difficult car, yeah, you're probably not going to have a good time. And, you know, it'd be a different story, I would say, if this fit into a well-established series in Assetto Corsa and there was a bunch of complementary cars. But I don't know a ton. I guess virtual racing cars might have gone there. But anyway, on the same plane as this, there's not a ton on offer. So it's not like this is the last in a field of offerings. And yes, we've been waiting for this one. So it's probably going to be primarily used as a hot lapping car. Or kind of an experiment for those mechanically inclined. You know, what do some of those settings that we saw in the setup menu, what do those mean to the car? And, you know, mechanics might have fun tinkering with those and getting more performance or stability out of the car. But again, probably not going to be used all that much in a pure race environment. So with that in mind, do I recommend it? Yeah, for that specific person for who doesn't mind just hot lapping with this thing and, you know, perhaps wants to do some tinkering or perhaps even wants to feel what is possibly the most realistic feeling mod ever created. You know, given the work that IER has done in the past, I'm inclined to say that this is probably as close to the real thing as you're going to get. So yeah, for that person, definitely. But again, if you're a novice, if you're uncomfortable with difficult cars, don't go in thinking that this is one that you're going to instantly connect with and just have a good time. It's not what I would describe as instant fun. It's a technical masterpiece, but yeah, it's not that sense of instant connection. It's not that sense of instant fun. It's not that sense of I can beat the snot out of this lap after lap and just continue to improve my lap times with ease. Nah, you're going to have to earn it with this one. Things that should be routine are not always routine in the P13b. It just has that knife edge. It feels pretty good in most situations on the default setup. The traction control feels excellent. Even absent ABS, the braking system is very good. But yeah, once you go a little bit past the limit, you're going to have to work to get the car back. And as you saw earlier in this video, I lost that battle already, despite having quite a few miles on the car already. Yeah, even with experience, it's difficult to keep this car contained. So that's kind of my advice for the P13C. So I'm going to go one more lap after this, give you a sample of the onboard sounds, and see if I can reset fastest lap here. Having a terrible run of it at the moment, down 7/10. Very inconsistent, embarrassingly so. There's a lock up there. All right, enjoy these sounds because they're actually very, very good. So no fastest lap, but hopefully you enjoyed those sounds. So yeah, that's the IER P13b, a very, very exciting car to bring to Assetto Corsa. It brings back a lot of memories of earlier days of this title, and a lot of names from the past who devoted time to covering this car. And yeah, cool addition, well done to IER. Definitely, nice to see them competing in the modern realm of Assetto Corsa mods again. But again, this is for a very, very, I would say, narrow audience within Assetto Corsa. As are all mods, to be fair, but this one is niche among niche, I would say. So let me know your thoughts if you own this car. Are you enjoying it? Has it been difficult for you? What's been your experience? Let me know in the comments, and yeah, we will see you next time.